swear or affirm the testimony you give here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So
Yes.
you'll go around to the witness stand. There's a small step there. Okay, you'll pull your chair up. That black box there is a microphone. It does not move, so you have to stand on your registry.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Bagby.
Good afternoon.
Please state your name for the jury.
My name is Ihsan Bagby,
And where are you employed?
University of Kentucky.
What is your position there?
I'm Associate Professor of Islamic Studies there.
How long have you been an associate professor at the University of Kentucky?
2002.
What education did you receive in order to hold that position?
I have a PhD from the University of Michigan in Islamic Studies.
And as part of your studies and professorship, do you do research?
Yes, my field of research is the American Muslim community, mosque in particular.
Do you consider yourself a Muslim?
Yes, I am a practicing Muslim as well as a scholar.
So, if I may ask, what is the good news of Islam? What is the main teaching?
Well, you can think of Islam in terms of moral codes to be very conservative, like a conservative Christian. Politically, Islam is very progressive. So it's a combination that you see in kind of socially conscious evangelical Christians, socially conscious conservative Catholics, but the moral view of Islam is basically identical to the Christian worldview. You don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't steal. Your life should be filled with kindness and justice for other people. That is the teaching that you will hear every day, every Friday at the mosque in sermons.
What are those ideals, those morals in Islam? Where do they come from?
The Quran, which is the holy book of Islam, and also the life example of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam.
And in Christianity and Judaism, there's the Ten Commandments. What sort of teachings specifically do Muslims have to turn to about right living?
Well, the Ten Commandments would be perfectly acceptable within Islam. As I said, there is no moral teaching that you would find in Christianity that you would not find in Islam. In fact, Islam is even more conservative. So for instance, drinking alcohol is not allowed. Doing any type of drugs is not allowed. Sex outside of marriage is not allowed. So it is a very religious or socially conservative code, as well as all of the things that we associated with good, honest living, again, being just to people, not stealing, not lying, not doing wrong to people. The main teaching is found throughout the Holy Book: believe in the one God and do good in the world. And you would, probably everybody would say that's exactly kind of the teaching of Christianity and Judaism. Islam views itself as an extension of Christianity and Judaism, not in a sense a different new religion, but a continuation of the message of Moses, the message of Jesus.
And are there specific articles of belief within Islam?
Yes, there are 6 articles of faith that constitute the basic set of beliefs. They include belief in the oneness of God. The God of Islam is the God of Christianity and Judaism. And to prove that, Christian Arabs, and there are a lot of Christian Arabs, call their God Allah, because that's the name of the one God in Arabic. It just says the name of the one God in English is God. But, so Christian Arabs acknowledge that they and Muslims believe in the same God, the one God, but also you are to believe in the scriptures, which include the gospel, by the way, and includes the Torah. You're supposed to believe in angels, all the prophets. So Muslims believe that there have been a long line of prophets, and Muhammad is simply the last in the long line of biblical prophets. There's the belief in the hereafter, judgment. These are the basic beliefs.
In addition to those articles of faith, is there guidance as to acts?
Yes, there are 5 required acts, which include publicly testifying that there's no God but God and Muhammad is the messenger of God, praying 5 times a day, fasting Ramadan, giving 2.5% of your wealth in charity, and making the pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in your lifetime. Those are the required acts of Islam.
And you've mentioned that you study mosques in particular. That's the house of worship or holy place for Muslims?
That's right.
Now, I'm wondering how Islam, as you described it to us, varies from the Nation of Islam that some people may be familiar with from maybe the 60s and 70s.
Right. The Nation of Islam developed among African Americans in the 1930s, and it was a mixture of Islam, black nationalism, Masonry, Theosophy. It was a mixture of all type of things. Muslims at that time, and when I say Muslim, I mean mainstream Muslims, the vast majority of people who call themselves Muslims, did not view the Nation of Islam as actually Islam, representing Islam, because they did not have the 6 articles of faith and did not believe in those 5 acts, the 5 required acts. So in 1975, the founder of the Nation of Islam died. His son took over. The founder, Elijah Muhammad, died. His son, Imam Warathuddin Muhammad, took over, and he brought the Nation of Islam into mainstream Islam. So he adopted the 6 articles of faith. He adopted the 5 pillars. And Minister Farrakhan resurrected in 1978. He resurrected the old Nation of Islam. And so actually the main body of the old Nation of Islam continued in mainstream Islam. So you have mainstream Islam, which is the vast majority of Muslims in this country. And the mosques that are here in Lexington are of the mainstream. There is no Nation of Islam mosque or temple per se. So there's a big difference between the two. And of course a big difference between the radicals, the Osama bin Ladens, these crazy people who do terrible acts in the name of Islam. They do not represent Islam. They do not represent Muslims. They are condemned by us and hated by us just as much as anybody else who hate to see wrong being done in this world.
You've mentioned several times how important it is to act properly and do justice in the world. So if someone is practicing Islam, how do you atone for prior bad acts or sin?
Right. The God of Islam, as the God in Christianity, is looked upon as a merciful and loving God. One of the key words that's used over and over again is that God is most compassionate. So the idea of God being compassionate runs throughout Islam. In fact, in one verse of the Quran, it says, I have prescribed on myself compassion. And therefore, the door of forgiveness is always open. You can do the worst acts, but you have the possibility of forgiveness if you truly turn to God, recognize your sin, admit your sins, to repent, and then to have the conviction of not repeating that sin, and then striving to live a life that of goodness. So that is the formula set down by Muhammad as to what forgiveness entails. And Muslims believe that forgiveness, that God will forgive sincere repentance.
You mentioned...
I might say that minor sins are easily forgiven. Major sins, though, you hope for the forgiveness of God, but you got to wait the judgment to find out whether God has truly forgiven you. In other words, you can wipe out minor sins by doing good deeds, but major sins are not automatic. You hope for the forgiveness of God. You have the expectation of the forgiveness of God, but your judgment is up to God.
And other than those 5 pillars you told us about, is there a public way to make those atonements, to make those...
Not really. Islam does not have a sense of confession, public confession to somebody. It is between you and God, and Muslims are supposed to see your new lifestyle. There is no requirement that you need to publicly say it, but you should see it in your actions, in one's actions, that they have truly turned. And in fact, the word for repentance in Islam actually means to turn. So the idea is that, in the Arabic word is tawbah, so you do repentance, it means that you turn 180 degrees. You turn towards God, away from your life you lived before, and that is to be the sign to everybody that you are making amends for what you've done in the past.
And with that honest repentance, that turn towards God, combined with Allah's mercy, there's a hope for forgiveness.
Yes, an expectation for forgiveness.
You mentioned radical Islamic extremists, and I'm wondering if you can explain to the jury the concept of jihad within Islam.
Well, jihad is an honored term. It means struggle. It does not mean holy war. The word is used both when Muhammad was in Mecca and when he was in Medina. In Mecca, Muhammad preached against polytheism, trying to convert his tribe from polytheism to monotheism. And he used the word jihad, and it simply means struggle. In fact, struggle to be good and struggle to try to convince other people. The city fathers of Mecca tried to destroy this message, tried to kill Muhammad. They persecuted, they killed some of his followers, they persecuted him, and finally he fled from Mecca and went to Medina, and war broke out between Mecca and Medina. And the word used for the struggle against the Meccans was jihad. So jihad for the Muslim means righteous struggle against wrong, against injustice. The injustice of the Meccan city fathers who persecuted and tried to kill Muhammad, who basically expelled the Muslims from Mecca, that justified fighting back and self-defense. So jihad basically means self-defense in a righteous cause. And of, you know, as we see in the headlines, the ISIS and the Qaedas of the world, they have perverted that understanding to mean basically warring against anybody who's not a Muslim. And in fact, even Muslims, I mean, they kill more Muslims than they kill non-Muslims. It's basically anybody who disagrees with them, they feel it justified to wage jihad. But jihad is an honored term, which simply means struggle. One of the reasons why Islam has always been attractive to African Americans, because instead of a message, wait until heaven, Islam preached that you should stand up for your rights and you should struggle for justice in the world. And Islam is a non-racist religion. It clearly advocates for all people of all colors, because there are many Africans who are part of Muhammad's community. So Muhammad's community was multiracial, and so there was a clear message that racism has no place in Islam. So Islam has, since its appearance in the early 1900s, appealed to African Americans because of this sense of, yes, it's good to struggle for your rights in the world and hope for the hereafter. So both, you know, don't forget about the hereafter, but yes, you actually should struggle for good, for justice in this world, and it had a powerful attraction to African Americans in this country.
When you teach Islamic studies courses, what's the most important thing that you want your students to take away from your courses?
Well, the thing I start with and end with is basically that the similarities between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are much more than the differences. Yes, there are differences, but the similarities far outweigh the differences. And this is what many people do not realize.
I guess I wanted to ask about guidance. What sort of guidance do the teachings of Islam provide for Muslims?
Well,
How to live correctly?
very clear guidance. One of the reasons why Islam has not deviated much from the basic teachings of the Quran, the Holy Book, and the example of Muhammad, because the Holy Book of Islam was set at the time of Muhammad, and it's there for everybody to read. And the example of Muhammad was recorded in documents which are readily available. So the guidance is very clear, is very clear. And everything I've said is acceptable by probably 99% of all Muslims, because it's in the Holy Book. It's in the sayings of Muhammad. So the guidance is very clear.
And is someone able to practice Islam from within prison?
Oh, yes. In fact, Islam is very strong in prisons because people wake up in prisons and say, is this how I want to live my life? And many turn to Islam. In fact, I might say, even here in Kentucky, probably Islam is one of the strongest, the Muslim group within prisons is one of the strongest, most active groups, definitely in the northern states, even like Ohio and so forth. Islam is the dominant force, in fact, in prisons as people try to remake their lives. And even here in Kentucky, it is a real force, because it is a force for good. And I must say that in the 60s, when people were starting to become Muslim in large numbers, wardens and other people really resisted Islam, you know, the crazy people, what's going on. But in almost all cases, prison officials have come to realize that Islam actually is a force for good and therefore is much more welcomed and accepted within the prison walls.
Those are all the questions I have for you, but some of the other attorneys may have questions.
Okay.
I just have a couple, Judge. Good afternoon, Dr. Begbie. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Have you ever met Dewan Mulazim?
I don't think so. I wouldn't be surprised if our paths have crossed, but I have no memory of ever meeting him.
So would it be fair to say then that you don't know anything about his religious practices?
Not personally, no.
And then do you not personally know what role Islam plays in his life?
I've heard secondhand,
Okay, so
but
I
not,
would assume that would be through the defense attorneys?
and other Muslims in the mosque. He and his father are well known in the community, especially those who were there from the 70s and 80s. They know him very well. So I have talked to people who knew Mulazim and his father, so that's another source. They're very happy to hear that he has become a practicing Muslim.
I imagine it was his father if it was in the 70s.
That's right.
You've told us that Islam is very conservative. So am I correct in assuming that Islam does recognize consequences for actions?
Yes,
Is that accurate?
that's true.
And then does Islam also recognize that states have laws that regulate and protect its people?
No doubt. And those laws are accepted, and Muslims are told from centuries ago that if you live in a non-Muslim country, you should follow the laws of that country. So that's an accepted view that came down over 1,000 years ago.
So it encourages following laws.
It demands it. It demands it.
Even better word.
Yeah.
So if a person's actions then are continually committing crimes and not following laws, would it be safe to say that they are not following the tenets of Islam?
True. Yes, they are not following the tenets of Islam. Yes.
Those are all of the questions I have. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Very present.
Bill, you're on.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Okay.
You are free to go. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
May I call your next witness?
Johnny Garner?
Johnny Gardner.
Johnny Tripp?
Johnny Gardner. Do you swear all the time the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Your bar, I see the only witness stand. Be careful of that step.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Donitra Garner.
You're going to have to be louder.
I'm sorry. My name is Donitra Garner.
And Donitra, what is it that you do for a living?
I'm a Center Operations Director for a medical facility,
Where are you working right now?
Richmond, Virginia.
When did you move to Richmond?
Approximately May 14th
And before then, where did you live?
in Lexington, Kentucky.
And had you lived in Lexington your entire life?
Yes, ma'am.
How is it that you know Dewan Mulazim?
It's my brother.
What's the age difference between the two of you?
I'm 4 years older.
What's your first memory of Dewan?
My first memory of him is when he came home from the hospital and my dad was changing his diaper and he peed on him.
And so do you and Dewan have the same father?
So biologically, we don't have the same father, but my mother married my dad when I was 2, so that's my father for my whole life, as long as he was living.
And what was his name?
Mulazim.
And when did he pass away?
In I think 2006, September the 13th, 06, I believe.
I'm going to show you a defense exhibit here. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
All right, so who is everyone in the photo? Do you want to point,
Okay.
either using my pen or your finger?
So that's the one. This is my mom. That's my dad. That's my sister. And embarrassingly, that's me.
Do you remember when this photo was taken?
Let's see, he looked like he was about 3 or 4. He was about 5. I think I was about 9, about 8 or 9 in that picture.
Okay. And so obviously your dad is in this photograph.
Yes.
When you were growing up, how often was your dad around?
So when I was really young, he was around a lot, and then it sporadically started changing. So he would take trips and be gone for work, and so then it started happening more and more often. So we just thought he was gone working, so it would just be us.
Okay, and was he just gone working?
So as we got a little older, we learned that my dad had a addiction to drugs, and so that's primarily the reason that he was out of the home.
So, but when did you learn about that?
So we were older when we learned, like teen to adult years, when we knew that my dad had a drug problem.
Do you remember how old you were?
So I remember being maybe about 16 or 17 and us going to a place called Alno for like a family type of gathering, and so I thought that was like for alcohol. So I didn't really associate that it was drugs. So we were a little bit older when we actually found out that my dad had a, addiction to crack. That he was struggling with addiction.
And at what point did you learn that he'd actually spent some time in prison as a result of his addiction?
I was probably about 18, about 17, 18 when we found out.
So in those times when your father was not around, where were you guys living? Where did you start off?
So we lived in an apartment complex called Pimlico. It's on Center Parkway in the Taste Creek area.
And who all was living there at the time?
So myself, my 2 siblings, my mom. When we all first moved there, we all lived there together. And then when my dad was gone, then it was us.
And when your dad was gone, who would take care of you?
So I was what you call a latchkey kid. So from about the 4th grade, we would walk home from school together and stay in the room.
Okay, and so how old would Dewan have been at that point?
So he's 4 years younger than me, so he would be a 5.
So tell us, so you at 9 years old, would walk home with Dewan, and how old was Nafisa?
She would have been 6 because she's 3 years younger than me. So they're a year apart.
And what would you guys do when you got home?
So we had to be creative. My mom, she was very protective of us because she was always working, so we weren't allowed to go outside while she wasn't home. And we had to stay like back in the back bedroom, which was her bedroom. So we had Super Mario Brothers. We would play Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and Power Pad. We played cards a lot, like Rummy and Speed. It's disputed who the champion is to this day. we also just were creative, and you know, we used to make up games. We used to play this little game that we called the trick, where one of us would lift the other up with our legs, and they would hold in that position, and you know, just be together and be creative.
So was Dewan a very energetic child?
Yes, he was a boy.
So what was it like having him when you were about 9 years old and you're not allowed to leave the back bedroom?
Right. You know, Dewan's like a little prankster, so we would joke a lot. We would, you know, play jokes on each other, tricks on each other. You know, it made us very close, though, because it was the three of us all the time, but we just kind of had to be creative. Like my mom she wanted to make sure we were safe, so we weren't just allowed to go and come as we pleased. We had to stay there. We had an answering machine, you know, with the house phone, so we could only even answer the phone if she was on the voicemail saying, "It's me, pick up." So, you know, we watched a little television, played cards, played Super Mario Brothers, and other games were just made-up games.
So of the three of you, how would you define your role out of the siblings?
Well, I'm the oldest, so I felt like I was the one that was responsible to make sure that we did what we were supposed to do and that we were good. So when my mom came home from working one of two jobs, you know, everything was good at home. We had chores. We made sure that we, you know, did what we were supposed to do when she came home, so everything would be smooth sailing for the next day.
How do you think Dewan saw himself in the family?
And I feel like he always felt like the protector because he was the only male of, you know, of three females.
And your dad wasn't around
Right.
very much when he was growing up.
Right.
When your dad was around in those times, how did he interact with Dewan?
You know, he was a typical dad. He was a big disciplinarian. So if Dewan got in trouble or any of us got in trouble, you know, we had punishments. But, you know, my dad did stuff with us. I remember a time that he took us to Kings Island. We were younger. I remember, like, Nafisa and Dewan playing t-ball when they were younger. Like, when my dad was there, he was there, you know. But when he was gone, he was gone. So he interacted with all of us. But I feel like he was stricter or harder on Dewan because he was the boy.
And what was his method of disciplining?
We got whoopings.
Okay, with what?
A leather belt.
Did your mom and dad ever argue about disciplining Dewan?
I remember one time specifically that my mom was kind of upset because she felt like, you know, that was enough. And, you know, I remember my dad being like, he's a boy, you know, he's the boy. So it was a disagreement.
And what was your mom's method of discipline?
We had whoopings, so.
Now, at some point, your dad got clean. Do you remember when that was?
So my oldest daughter, Deja, is 20, and my oldest niece, Dania, is 19. So right after the girls were born, they're about 6 months apart. So after they were born, my dad got clean and sober, and him and my mom got back together, and he was the best granddad ever. So my kids didn't know that side of him. They only knew granddaddy, you know. So that's when he got clean.
So they knew the good sober side.
Correct.
And how do you think Dewan reacted when your dad tried to come back into his life?
I'm not 100% sure. I know that, you know, my brother was a man at that point, so I'm sure that you know, I'm not 100% sure about that reaction. I know that my dad loved all of us, and we all had our own relationships with him. So, you know, when my kids were little before he passed away, my dad would call me every day, and we would have like a 2-minute conversation. He would just say, "I just want to let you know I love you," and hang up, and I'd be like, "Hello," and he'd already hung up the phone because that's what his purpose was, you know. So he was a straightforward man, so I'm not 100% sure, you know, but I know they loved each other, so.
Did you ever attend mosque with your dad?
I did. I was young when that happened, but I was the oldest of them, so I remember.
And do you know why you guys stopped going to mosque?
Oh, because my dad was gone from the house, so we just didn't go anymore.
And where would you go instead?
So there was kind of like an intermittent period where we didn't go anywhere. Then my grandmother, who was Pentecostal, wanted us to go to church with her because she wanted us to be going somewhere. And then when I was about 11, we started going to Greater Liberty Baptist Church.
So do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
Do you know what church this would have been for?
That would have been for Greater Liberty Baptist Church. That was the Youth March for Christ that we went to every year when we were younger.
Okay, and who do you recognize in the photo?
So this is Dewan, and that's my sister Nafisa.
Do you remember this particular time?
So we went a few times, and they were all pretty much the same. But, you know, we gathered at the church, like all the youth of the church, and it would be a big deal because it was youth all over the country, the state, that there each youth little section would come and meet, and we would do a youth march for Christ in a kind of rural area there.
How much did Dewan participate in the church growing up?
He participated. So I'm not going to say we didn't have a choice, but my mom was like a straight and narrow type of person, so she went to church, so we all were involved. He participated in the junior usher board. He was a junior usher, and he participated in the choir. There was one lady specifically that lived around the corner named Miss Tinsley. He was very close with her, and she used to fix the junior usher Sunday dinner. They would go over to her house after church, every Sunday after church, and go have dinner there. So we were all involved in the church.
Now, you know, of course, that Dewan has been arrested and convicted of felony offenses before, right?
Yes,
In the times that he was out, would he still go to church with the family? Would he spend time with the family?
Oh, he's very family oriented. So he would always spend time with the family, whether he was at my house, my mom's house, my sister's house. If the two of us lived together, then he would be there, you know, wherever we were, he was.
I'm going to show you another picture. Do you recognize that person?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay, and how old approximately do you think he is in this photo?
He looks like he's in about the 6th grade, so I'd say about 11, about 6 or 7, so 11 or 12.
Okay. And what about this photo right here?
Yes.
It's really hard to see on that.
That's Dewan and
See,
Shalonda.
You see his gold teeth, I think, and that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you know approximately when that would have been taken?
Probably about maybe 6 years ago or so.
Now, we've heard testimony from your children, and we know that Dewan has a lot of nieces and nephews. So can you tell us who we're looking at in this photo?
Okay. So this is our oldest niece, Dania. That's her son, Honor. This is Theory, and that's Mikey.
Okay, and these are not your children, right?
No, those are my sister's children. Oh, so the 3 girls are my sister's children, and that's her grandson.
And this picture here, what are we looking at?
So this is Mikey's graduation from elementary school. This is Dewan, Nafisa, Micaiah, Theory, and Dania.
And how would you describe Dewan's relationship with his nieces and nephews?
He loves them, and they love him.
Now, as we've said, and as you know, I mean, he has spent some time in prison. How do you feel about having Dewan be, you know, a part of your children's lives, knowing that?
My brother's very family oriented, as I've said. So every time, every birthday, every holiday, he calls them, he talks to them, he's encouraging to them. You know, I have 2 children in college right now. One's going to be a junior this year. He's always encouraging them to keep up the good work, you know, do well in school, you know, don't fall into peer pressures that can be out there, especially with my son, you know, him kind of growing up the same type of lifestyle that my brother had, because being the only male in a house full of females, he's just really encouraging to them, and he always is positive and has always shown love, for all of us. So,
How do you think that's impacted your children in particular?
so they miss him when he's away, and when he's home, they always want to be with him. I have some other cousins that are my first cousin's children, and they love him as well. They call themselves like the thumb-sucking crew or whatever, because it's a bunch of little girls that suck their thumbs, and they always look up to him, and they feel like he's their uncle too. He's just always around his family, he's always been like that.
Do you remember a situation where you were in court for Dewan one day?
Yes.
And who were you there with?
My sister Nafisa.
And approximately how old was Dewan?
So I think he was 18.
What happened that day?
He went to court for an offense, and upon the verdict, the judge was asking if there was anybody there with the family. So my sister and I stood up because we were there with his family, and the judge told both of us that he would be ashamed if he was our family member and he wouldn't stood up with us. And my response was, I felt that they should be trying to seek help instead of further punishment for him, because he had already had, a couple of situations, and I felt like he needed more help than institutionalism.
And how was that taken?
They asked me to leave the courtroom, and actually said, if you say anything else, you're going to be held in contempt. So then I exited the building.
Now, you're not saying that your brother doesn't need to be punished for what he's been convicted of, right?
That's not what I'm saying.
But do you think maybe something could have been done differently when Dewan was younger, when he was growing up? Something so that we wouldn't be here?
I do. There are so many other methods and ways other than just sending him to camp. I feel like there could have been some type of counseling available to find out what the root of the problem was. I feel like he kind of fell victim to a system, and that's my honest opinion. Nobody's perfect. I'm not saying that he's not responsible for things that he's done, but I do feel like there are different methods that could have occurred, and we may not be in the situation that we're in now with repeat situations like that.
So how was it for you growing up? And did you find that you were always able to stay on the right track? I'm not perfect either, and so growing up, I think I was just more timid than my brother and sister, so I wasn't always on the right track, though. I mean, I got in trouble like everybody else. I got punishments. I did things that were wrong that I knew were wrong, and got in trouble as well for things. I even had, an issue where I had a legal issue, earlier in my life, and so, no, I wasn't perfect. So. How would you describe Dewan to someone who had never met him before?
And I would describe him as funny, loving, and protective, loyal to his family.
What do you think that this jury needs to consider? Because he has been convicted of something very serious. He's going to be spending a lot of time in prison. What do you think they need to consider about him before making a final decision on what that prison term should be?
So I would ask the jury to consider the fact that my brother's been convicted of a crime, but that's not who he is. That's not his character as a person. I know that what the prosecution showed regarding his past offenses, even when I heard it, it just sounds so different than the person that he is. I feel like he's made mistakes in his life, and I do feel like anyone can change. I feel that, his loyalty to his family, him always being encouraging to my kids, him always being there, being around, you know, when I talk to him on the phone, regardless of whatever he's going through, he always tells me as long as I'm good, he's good. As long as my kids are good, he's good. As long as mom's good, then he'll be fine. So he always puts us before he puts himself. And I would just ask that you guys really consider those character traits. He's a young man. If he was given, you know, 20 years, he would have to serve about 17. He would be like 52 before he was able to come home. I would hope that, you know, you all would be able to see a person and not just a charge, that you would be able to see that people do change and can change, and that if he has hope and, you know, I feel like he can do good things in life even though he'll be older. I do feel like that's a long time. It took me a while to get to where I needed to be in life. I feel like I matured with time, and I feel like everybody needs that chance.
Thank you, those are all the questions I have. Your Honor, I would move at this point, I don't remember what exhibit number we left off on. Could I move to introduce these once I can label them? So, the defense exhibit 28 through 33.
Any questions? Anyone have any questions?
Yes, Your Honor, just a few.
Do you work, Ms. Garner?
Yes, I do.
And what do you do?
I'm the Center Operations Director for a medical facility.
A medical facility?
Yes.
How long have you held that position?
I've been with my current employer since 2004.
That's a while.
Yes, it'll be 14 years.
Okay. And it sounds like your mom worked hard as well.
Yes.
What did she do?
So she was a hairdresser for a while. She always had several jobs, as long as I remember, a minimum of 2.
She always had at least 2 jobs.
Yes. She was, so she was a licensed cosmetologist. She did hair, and she also worked with the Fayette County Public School System. So she would be doing both of those, and she also worked for Parks and Recreation.
That sounds like 3 jobs then.
It would depend on the certain time. So her school, Fayette County, was open during the school year, and then in the summer she would work at one of the shelters like Charles Young Center. That's where she worked.
Okay. And so despite all of these jobs, or I guess even with all of these jobs, she was still very active in your all's lives.
Yes, as much as she could be.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Any further this witness? Thank you, ma'am. You may step down with your.
Those are all of the witnesses for this law.
Okay, so Mr. Mulazim announces closed.
Yes.
Anything further from the public? All right, so that's the proof for the penalty phase.